We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back here on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. On our special illegal immigration edition today, we've been speaking with Joe Schaefer, Liberty Nation's political columnist, who's written extensively on the child exploitation that takes place. And we've been covering the whole gamut of really what all the aspects are to this. But Joe, for our last part here, I really want to talk about how mass uncontrolled immigration hurts. It increases GDP, I believe. Overall, it increases the wealth with more immigration in some circles, but it's an uneven balance. So the rich or the wealthier tend to get wealthier due to this, as we've discussed. Because of course they can pay a pittance to the illegal immigrants because they don't have to worry about health, safety, regulations, even unions, things like that. But the people who are the most impacted are those who would say they're on the bottom rungs of the ladder of American fiscal society. And in America, that's by and large, that's black folks, isn't it? And that's Hispanic folks, legal people who've come from south of the border and are now citizens of the United States. And I guess a lot of poor white folks in rural America, they're the people that are getting squeezed. The people who can least afford to get squeezed are the people getting squeezed. How does that work out?
I agree to that to a certain extent. I remember one of the first articles I wrote about when I first came to Liberty Nation, I guess 5 years ago, was about the diseases that illegal aliens bring in, like smallpox and things that had been almost eradicated. And I quoted a black activist. He was a black illegal immigration activist. And I researched him as part of the quote, and they talked about that, how the Democrats court the black voter, and yet their policies are hurting the black worker on a very basic level. And illegal immigration was the heart of his argument. But I don't like to put it in racial terms like that, because this is hurting all of us. It's not just hurting blacks and Hispanics. It's literally hurting all
I
of
agree.
us.
I agree.
And to me,
my point was that fiscally, the people most exposed to this tend to be minorities.
I really disagree that we all have to live in this cesspool and let's call it that. America has turned into a toilet today. And if you think I'm wrong, take a look at any big city. The quality of life in America has plummeted since 9/11, and that affects all of us. I don't agree that it affects minorities more. Yeah, yes, they are down lower on the ladder and they are not able to come up. But white people are getting pushed down there with them. We're all getting pushed down there. I really do truly believe it's a betrayal of the elites, is what I call it. It is a wealthy, a privileged class going rogue on the rest of us. And let me give you a couple of examples that I think are really revealing. The Republican Senate there are 2 Republican Senate candidates officially endorsed by the GOP establishment who were top executives for Bridgewater Associates. Bridgewater Associates is the largest hedge fund in America that does business with China. They are overwhelmingly involved with China. And in fact, Reuters just reported in January, they are doubling their investment in China this year. And Mitch McConnell's Senate Leadership Fund personally recruited Dave McCormick, who was the former CEO of Bridgewater, to run in Pennsylvania. He just missed out on getting the nomination in 2022 when Mehmet Oz got it. So that's one. And then Steve Daines, who runs the Senate Republican Senatorial Committee, personally recruited another former Bridgewater top executive, who is Pete Domenici, the longtime former senator in New Mexico. His daughter, former top Bridgewater associate, personally recruited by Steve Daines to run in New Mexico. So you have 2 Republicans who the Republican establishment were pushing through the primary process to become the GOP Senate candidates in 2 states who are overwhelmingly tied to the hip with China. And yet we are told we have to stop the darn Democrats from doing this. It's a uniparty. It's going on in both sides. And if you don't understand that, this is, to me, it's not a left-right thing. This is
Mhm.
a betrayal by a moneyed elite. And you're seeing it with these large companies with 800 Packer Sanitation, one of the companies I wrote about that was exploiting illegal alien child labor, $800 million in revenues. And that was in 2017. It's probably higher now. And they're doing this and they're being fined like $1 million, which is nothing to them. This is a betrayal by a wealthy class against the rest of us. It affects Black people, it affects Hispanics, it affects white, it affects every single American. And I think those are the things that we need to talk about, and it transcends Republican Democrat politics. So to those who say, "Oh, we've got to beat the Democrats and save America," well, you know what? It's a lot more difficult than that. It's both sides, and it's
Mm.
happening, and it's a wealthy class doing this to the rest of America.
Joe, we're approaching the end of the show, and I guess what I want to move on to now is to really talk about. We have this idea that, I mean, the wonderful thing that why America has always been this to many other countries, especially my country. America's been this shining beacon of freedom. You have this robust constitution that, although it takes blows and sometimes bends here and there, it's always been something about which people can unite under is the Constitution. So it's not America throughout its history. It's become something where it doesn't matter what your identity is. It's that you're all gathered under a single banner, and that banner is essentially it's a cry for freedom. It is that banner, and that's always been something wonderful. And obviously, during the 80s, there was always the great movies, Iron Eagle and whatnot, and they always sort of gave you this feeling, like, oh, that's a country that loves itself in a good way, that's proud of itself. Whereas many other countries, especially the old European countries, I think it was Orwell who pointed out that in some circles it's considered rather disgusting to be proud of one's country. But that's never really been the case in America. But it seems to me, and this is just an opinion, Joe, that what it means to be an American is changing and not necessarily for the better. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. I think it really needs to be driven home to people. And I think it has been in recent years, is we are really on the precipice of losing this country. This country, the heritage, everything that was bequeathed to us, we're on the point of losing. The Soviet Union didn't just happen overnight. There were factors involved in that development, and a lot of it. I am the biggest opponent of communism, that you'll ever find. But the Russian aristocracy was corrupt to the core. They were positively inviting the revolution that happened. So, we talk about moneyed elites and they don't care about the people. Well, there's going to be a reaction, and the reaction is quite ugly. What's interesting and what's happening in America is,
Carry
I
on.
don't know if it's a reaction or a counter reaction, but it's sort of the empire strikes back. You're seeing the ruling establishment fighting back against what they know is bubbling up to the surface, disinformation, things like that. They want to stifle this. They want to sit on a roiling pot.
You think that nothing's going to change with the upcoming November election, regardless of who wins?
I think things are going to change eventually, is my point. When you have 16-year-old kids being sucked into machinery and killed, that's not sustainable in the long term. They're trying to stifle a reaction that is going to happen. And the more they delay it, the worse it's going to be. So I hope for the sake of our country that it happens in 2024. But if it doesn't, if it's kicked down the can, it's only going to be more incendiary when it does happen, unfortunately. So, yeah, I hope it changes to 2024, but they cannot maintain this broken status quo for much longer.
Yeah, as Ronald Reagan said, status quo is Latin for the mess we're in. Joe Schaefer, thank you ever so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And that's just about it for this special edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. Before I leave you with my final thoughts, I'd like to just thank today's guests, author and columnist Joe Schaefer, and you, the listeners, out there in the big wide world. Thank you for joining us. So here's my roundup. When I think of illegal immigration that is happening across pretty much all the westernized nations, I'm reminded of Winston Churchill's famous adage. He said, quote, "A simple way to take measure of a country is to look at how many want in and how many want out," end quote. So in many ways, it's a mark of achievement that so many people are willing to break the nation's laws to get in, but it comes with a cost too. And it's notable that voters are never genuinely asked about that. When Joe Biden ran for president in 2020, he did not tell the American people that they would see the greatest growth and flood of illegal immigrants the country had ever witnessed. Of course not. But that's what has occurred. And with that, as I say, is a cost. As we've discussed on today's show, we get child factory workers killed. We get sex trafficking of children. We get an increase in crime. We get gang violence. And we get fentanyl deaths to the tune of 250,000, 250,000 every year. Now that's 5 times as many Americans died during the entire Vietnam War conflict. And now, as the tide rises so high, we see once proud sanctuary cities jettisoning their high-minded principles and saying, no more, don't send us any more illegal immigrants. Why? Well, because the mass of humanity is an overwhelming force that, and this bears emphasizing, shows no signs of slowing down. Whatever the nation is dealing with now, imagine what it will be like when there are twice as many, 3 times as many or more. How long will this shining example of what it means to be a solid functioning nation cease to be just that? And then people start to want out. What would Churchill say then, I wonder? We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.